In this episode, we are going to make printer problems feel much less mysterious by connecting what you see on the page with what is probably happening inside the machine. New technicians often think printers fail in random ways, but most print defects and paper handling issues leave clues that point toward a fairly small group of causes. A streak across a page, a repeated shadow image, a jam in the same area, or a document that refuses to print on both sides usually tells a story about heat, movement, pressure, alignment, or worn parts. Once you learn how to read those symptoms, you stop guessing, stop swapping parts blindly, and start thinking like a technician who can protect time, money, and user trust before a simple problem turns into an expensive support mistake. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good place to begin is the idea that printer troubleshooting starts with the symptom, not with the part you want to blame. Many beginners hear that toner cartridges fail often, so they assume every bad page means the cartridge is bad, but that kind of shortcut leads to wasted supplies and missed root causes. The page itself is evidence, and the way the paper moved through the printer is evidence too. If the defect appears before the image is fixed to the page, the source is usually different from a defect created after the page has already been printed. If a problem appears only when paper feeds from a certain tray, that points in a different direction from a problem that happens no matter where the sheet started. A comm technician learns to compare the pattern, the location, the timing, and the consistency of the symptom before deciding whether the issue is consumables, settings, rollers, paper condition, or a worn internal assembly. Streaks are one of the most common complaints, and they can mean different things depending on whether the streak is vertical, horizontal, dark, light, continuous, or repeating. A long vertical streak often suggests that something along the imaging path is contaminated, damaged, or not making even contact as the page moves through. On a laser printer, that can point toward toner issues, a dirty imaging surface, or a problem in the transfer process where toner moves from internal components onto the paper. On an ink printer, streaks often suggest clogged print nozzles, low ink flow, contamination, or poor cartridge performance. The important lesson is that a streak is rarely just a random mark. It usually reflects a consistent failure in one narrow part of the image path, and the more uniform the streak looks from page to page, the more likely it is tied to a specific worn, dirty, or depleted component rather than to a one-time paper event. Smudges tell a different story because a smudge often means the printer created an image but failed to keep that image clean and stable as the page finished moving through the device. When toner or ink rubs off easily, the technician should think about whether the material on the page was properly fixed, dried, or handled. On laser printers, that often raises concern about the fusor, which is the heated assembly that bonds toner to paper through pressure and heat. If the fusor is not reaching proper temperature or if its surface is worn, the result can be loose toner, smeared output, or marks that worsen when the page is touched. Smudging can also come from paper that is too damp, too slick, too thick, or simply not well matched to the printer's design. A smart technician remembers that the page, the environment, and the consumable all interact, so the problem is not always a broken part even when the print looks messy. Ghosting is one of the more distinctive print defects because it creates a faint repeat of part of the image farther down the page. That repeated pattern matters because it suggests that some internal surface is carrying leftover image material and placing it again after the original image should have been cleared. In laser printing, ghosting often points to parts involved in imaging, charging, transfer, or fusing, especially when the repeated image appears at a regular interval. That regular spacing is useful because it hints that a rotating component may be the source. A technician does not need to become a printer engineer to use that clue well. It is enough to understand that ghosting usually means something inside the printer is not fully releasing, cleaning, or fixing the image when it should, which makes worn internal parts more likely than a simple user setting problem. Consumables deserve special attention because they are designed to be replaced, but that does not mean they are responsible for every failure. Toner, ink, drums, waste containers, and maintenance kits all wear down over time, and each can affect output quality in its own way. Low toner may cause faded pages or uneven density, while a damaged cartridge can create leaks, scattered marks, or repetitive contamination. Ink that is old, low, or clogged may lead to missing colors, banding, or patchy output. A worn drum can create repeating defects because it touches the image process again and again with every rotation. The beginner mistake is to think of consumables as simple full or empty items, when in reality, they can be partially functional and still produce strange symptoms. Good technicians learn to ask whether the print defect matches the way that consumable would normally fail, rather than replacing it simply because it is the easiest thing to swap. Paper jams make many users think the printer is broken in a dramatic way, but a jam is often just the visible result of poor paper control. The printer must pick up a sheet, separate it from the stack, move it at the correct speed, keep it aligned, and deliver it through several paths without slipping or grabbing too much at once. Rollers are central to that process because they grip and guide the paper, and as they wear down, they lose friction and reliability. Separation pads matter too because they help make sure only one sheet feeds at a time. When rollers become smooth, dirty, or hardened with age, misfeeds, skewed pages, and repeated jams become more likely. A technician who understands paper movement sees jams not as isolated accidents, but as signs that the machine is struggling to control paper with the consistency it once had. The location of a jam is often more valuable than the fact that a jam happened at all. If paper never leaves the tray properly, the pickup area is suspicious, especially the rollers, the separation mechanism, or the paper itself. If the sheet begins normally but stops midway, the issue may be deeper in the paper path where sensors, guides, rollers, or internal assemblies help direct movement. When paper exits partially and then crumples, the technician starts thinking about the output path, exit rollers, or any component that is supposed to release the page smoothly. This is why repeated jams in the same section are so important. Consistency usually means the problem is physical and localized. Random jams everywhere may suggest paper quality, humidity, overfilled trays, mixed paper sizes, or user loading habits. But repeated jams in one zone strongly suggest a worn or obstructed internal part. Duplex failures deserve their own attention because printing on both sides of a sheet is more demanding than printing on one side. The printer has to finish one side, redirect the paper through an internal path, align it again, and feed it back through with very little room for error. When duplex printing fails, the cause may be as simple as the wrong paper type, the wrong media setting, or a job that is not allowed to duplex because of size or content rules. But mechanical causes are common too, especially in older or heavily used printers. Rollers inside the duplex path can wear out, guides can drift, and the duplex unit itself can become less reliable with age. A duplex problem, therefore, does not always mean the whole printer is failing. It often means the extra path used for two-sided printing is exposing weaknesses in paper handling that one-sided jobs do not reveal. Settings matter more than many new technicians expect, and printer behavior can look like hardware failure when the real issue is a mismatch between the job and the device's configuration. A user may select thick stock without actually loading thick stock, or the printer may assume plain paper while the tray contains envelopes or labels. These mismatches change how the printer handles heat, timing, traction, and routing. Wrong paper size settings can trigger jams, skewing, or tray errors because the printer expects one kind of movement and receives another. Wrong finishing choices can produce strange outcomes if the printer lacks the needed accessory or if the document is not suited to that option. That is why effective troubleshooting includes the job settings, the tray settings, and the physical media together. The page is not just interacting with hardware. It is also interacting with the rules the printer believes it should follow. Finishing problems are often overlooked because people focus first on whether the page printed at all, but finishing features are a major part of how many business printers add value. Staples, hole punches, collated output, sorted sets, and folded pages all depend on extra assemblies that work after or near the end of printing. When those features fail, the technician should think about alignment, accessory availability, mechanical wear, or job settings before assuming the main print engine is bad. If pages print clearly but are not stapled, come out in the wrong order, or fail to hold punch, the issue may sit in the finishing unit rather than in the imaging path. Finishing assemblies contain moving parts too, and like rollers or fusers, they wear with use. The more complex the finishing option, the more likely small mechanical misalignment or setting mismatch can interrupt the result even when the printer still produces good images. Worn internal parts create some of the hardest issues for beginners because the symptoms may look familiar but refuse to go away after obvious items are replaced. A technician might swap toner, reload paper, and confirm settings, only to find that streaks, jams, or ghosting remain unchanged. That is when it becomes more likely that the problem lies in assemblies that users never think about, such as rollers deep in the path, diffuser, transfer components, sensors, or finishing hardware. These parts often degrade gradually, which means users may describe the printer as getting worse over time rather than suddenly breaking. That history matters. A slow decline usually supports the idea of wear, contamination, heat damage, or accumulated mechanical stress. A technician who listens for that pattern can separate a new configuration issue from an aging hardware problem without getting lost in unnecessary guesses. Another important lesson is that symptoms can overlap, so technicians should avoid forcing every problem into a single category too early. A page can jam because rollers are worn, but it can also jam because damp paper bends differently or because the settings told the printer to expect another size. Smudging may suggest a fuser issue, but poor media choice can create similar results. A faint repeated image may point toward ghosting from internal components, but contamination from a damaged consumable can confuse the picture. This is why technicians look for clusters of evidence instead of trusting one clue by itself. When the same symptom appears with the same tray, the same paper type, and the same pattern on the page, confidence grows. Good troubleshooting is not guessing faster. It is narrowing the field until the most likely explanation stands out clearly from the alternatives. For beginners, one of the most useful habits is to think in terms of path, process, and pattern. Path means asking where the paper traveled and where along that route something may have gone wrong. Process means thinking about whether the issue came from feeding, imaging, transferring, fixing, or finishing. Pattern means studying whether the defect repeats, shifts, smears, fades, or appears only under certain conditions. This approach keeps you grounded when printer terminology starts to sound overwhelming. You do not need to memorize every internal component on day one to reason well about printer failures. What matters first is learning that visible output and paper behavior are not random. They are clues created by systems that usually fail in understandable ways once you know how to read them. By the time you face real printer calls, the goal is not to become impressed by complexity or intimidated by strange pages. The goal is to stay calm, observe carefully, and connect a symptom to the most likely group of causes before money is spent or parts are ordered. Streaks tend to point toward contamination, imaging trouble, or consumable problems. Smudges often raise questions about fixing, drying, or media compatibility. Ghosting suggests image carryover from worn internal components. Jams and duplex issues usually tell you something about rollers, routing, settings, or the paper itself, while finishing failures often live in accessory hardware or job configuration rather than in the core print engine. When you think this way, printer support becomes much more logical, and that steady logic is what separates random part swapping from real technical judgment.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.